Hey, welcome back to Trek Chat, a podcast brought to you by Trek on the Tube. I am your usual host, Sean, and joining me today are two very special guests. One is returning. I'm very happy to have him come back. Kyle Sullivan over from the Trekspertise team. Thank you so much for joining me once again.
Absolutely, man. Love it.
And the other guest that we have, I forgot your real name, but you're going by Girafe, right?
Yeah, my name is Girafe.
That's it. That's the real name.
That's the real name, man.
Yeah, so we had the pleasure of meeting over at Mission Chicago for the first time, which was really awesome. And now you're joining me for the first time here on a Trek Chat, so it's an honor.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for being on. Today we are talking not so much about something like lighthearted or fun, I guess. We're talking about something that I find perhaps a bit troubling, although maybe I'm being a bit dramatic. But yeah, we're going to talk about how American, how specifically, I guess, United States Star Trek is as a franchise. And this is, I guess, both in terms of like real world and in terms of how it is in universe. So I have a few bullet points, though I don't have like an outline for conversation. So if you guys have like any opening statements, or do you guys want to throw out one of my bullet points to start off with?
Be my guest.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, I feel like for starters, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like for starters, like the whole concept of the United Federation of Planets in itself is very based on like the United States of America. It doesn't feel so much like, I guess, a European constitution there. It feels very much more like a United States of America kind of concept.
I never really saw it this way, but now I'm not gonna be able to unsee it. Thank you, Sean.
I don't know if that's a bad thing specifically, though.
Well, it depends on how you feel about the United States.
Yeah.
It's a love-hate relationship, I guess. And
Oh, boy.
it wavers, doesn't it?
Maybe, yeah. Depends on who you ask, I guess. You know, the Lakota might have a word to say about that. That's different than me. But yeah, it's 100%. 100% United Statesian.
I always saw it a little bit more like the European Union, to be honest, because when I look at the United States, I don't really see states with different cultures, because everybody speaks kind of the same language and has kind of the same culture to me. But when I look at the European Union, each country has their own set of rules, has their own language, has their own culture, and they were people that were separated for centuries and then got together into a union that is mostly based on trade and on aggression, which I recognize more in the United Federation of Planets. That's why I never really saw it as the United States.
I can go into a little bit of history here if that'll help, like what the origin of
Please do.
like a confederacy or a federacy is. So, Europe was 500 some odd years ago, like a series of theocratic religious kingdoms, right? There was no democracy going on. There was no confederate kind of stuff. None of that kind of political organization was going on. When they showed up in North America, they found confederacies of nations, small independent Native American nations, and they saw that model and thought about it for 100 and some odd years. And when the American Revolution came around, that was a model that they were ready to try, the colonists. And so it is kind of a very American, like very Native American kind of an ideal. I mean, you see it all over the planet and other places too, but like at that moment, when Europe met the nations of North America, they saw that in practice and thought, this can be applied to European thought. And then they did. And so like the United States started out the way the European Union is now. In a sense, there are a lot of other complicated issues as to why it's not like the European Union now. But, that confederate or federated system, I guess, got its start on the world stage in the United States. And now everyone's trying, the African Union exists. South America's got their own version of it. The European Union's kicking butt. And each one is going in a different kind of path. And maybe the United States, maybe our version of it was co-opted by larger cultural forces. Because we're very diverse. We're the most diverse country ever but like we're very homogenized at the same time. And Europe is very distinct, little distinct units. And that's very much like the United Federation of Planets.
You see that each of us like actually recognize their own culture in the United Federation of Planets. So I'd say it's a win. It's a good thing.
Granted. No, I was gonna say I feel like sometimes the United Federation of Planets is almost homogenizing like the varying cultures. Like we do see like the Andorians and the Tellarites, and everyone's different, but to some certain extent, everyone's at some point everyone's like part of the same fleet. They've got the same ship. They're almost everyone's using the same tech. They arrive on these new planets, and they kind of like the first things that they set up are like their own little pieces of technology. Like they've got the replicators, that kind of stuff, and it's all very kind of like homogenized Federation tech or Starfleet tech. So in that regard, I feel like they're homogenizing all of the cultures under one Federation banner. But then kind of like how the US, like every different state, although they're not countries, like all of these states can define their own laws on certain topics. That's what the United Federation of Planets are doing. Like all of these different planets that exist, they've got their own laws because they've got their own customs, their own kind of species. I guess they've got their own like everything, because it's even more alien than humans, right?
Listen, replicators know no boundaries. If there were no replicators, like the wheel for me. Like when you invent something that cool and that useful and that easy that solves like world's hunger, it's not cultural anymore. Like just get the replicator. Yeah. You imagine anybody saying like, no, I don't want a replicator. Only the Picards were like, no, I don't want technology. I see like the wheel a little bit. Like it's a great invention. It solves a lot of problem. You don't have to carry stuff on your back. Then, you know, it's not as heavily culturally marked than, for example, movies. They never tell us a lot about like the music they listen or the movie they watch. You know, are they all like from Earth? That would be something that I would be interested in to know.
Which is a beautiful transition, because
thank you.
Talking about like human culture on the show, very often, and I tend to pick up on this because I was a pastry chef for a while. So when it comes to like food, cakes, that kind of stuff, and then when it comes to film, like movies, TV shows, that kind of stuff, it's very American that they're showing. And maybe there's a rights thing, like maybe they always want to show like the old Paramount films or whatever it is, but
Anglo-Saxon. It's very Anglo-Saxon.
I mean, yeah, sure, rights are an issue. If you're going to play a movie inside of a movie, you have to pay for that. And usually, if it's a famous movie, you have to pay a lot of money for that. But at the same time, Star Trek is an American creation with a primarily American audience. So like they're going to lean into cultural trappings that their audience are going to recognize, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. That was part of my notes too. It's like it's made for Americans.
It pisses me to no end. It pisses me off to no end.
Oh, no.
That Picard that Picard is always quoting Shakespeare. Do you know a lot of French people that are quoting Shakespeare all the time? And Moby Dick? Like, I know zero. And again, I'm like, my trade is literature. And I will never quote Shakespeare. I can quote Shakespeare. It's not the first thing that comes to my mind. I'm going to quote, I don't know, Molière or like something else. And I'm a bit disappointed that they never made up stuff. I think Lower Decks is going in this like with like acid punk Klingon music. I mean, they could be quoting like great Andorian writers or Tellarites diplomat. No, they always like, oh, Shakespeare. And I'm get out of here, Shakespeare. I'm done.
Shakespeare is officially overrated.
Oh my.
Cancelled.
I mean,
on this podcast.
He's good. He's very clever. I'm not going to pull any of that, but like he became a cultural reference point for English speaking peoples to the point where they were shoving him in every textbook, and like it elevated him to a whole other level. Mm-hmm. The praise is he's praiseworthy, but like at the level where like people 400 years from now on spaceships in other solar systems are going to be quoting him.
So wait, Shakespeare is 1500s, right? So in TNG it's like 800 years old stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now who quotes stuff that is 800 years old?
What is that? Is that relative to
1200s or something like that?
Relative to us, is that Beowulf or something? So like, is there a naval ship captain in the Arabic Sea or something that's quoting Beowulf at his crew? I want to know. These are things I want to know.
So
to be fair, like could the current day hype for Shakespeare have participated to like cementing him so severely in like I guess the human culture.
In universe, maybe.
Why
But like
not?
the reason Shakespeare the reason Shakespeare is such a quick and trade reference point for American audiences is because they shoved him in every one of our high school textbooks.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
not Marlowe, not Christopher Marlowe.
I waited to live in the US to be bombarded all the time by Shakespeare, to be honest. And it's like the fifth country that I live in, and no other country has such like a obsession with Shakespeare. So every time there's Moby Dick and Shakespeare, every time there's a reference in Star Trek about it, it's like, come on, like you're supposed to be a whole Earth thing. Quote something else, make up stuff, just make up stuff. To be honest, that would, and I think it's a little bit to come to back to our subject. It shows how much the United Federation of Planet and Starfleet is heavily American in the end. Not even Terran or Earthian, I don't know, but just American.
Exactly.
Like all the captains we know, they're all American except Picard, and I don't count him as French. You know my my position on this.
He's of confused heritage, I think.
He's French. Yeah.
He's French, yes, with quotation mark. Well, they made him English, right? British in Picard. So can I spoil? Yeah, well, I mean,
yeah, we can spoil
whatever.
Picard. I'm gonna give a couple points to Picard for doing that. They did some legwork with when it comes to like Picard's, I guess, heritage and Picard's culture. Like they worked on like his mother and the whole I guess immigration thing, or like changing, or the way his family is linked to both France and the UK. So I think they did some good job. They did a good job on that.
Yeah, it's good retcon, to be honest, makes sense. But in the end, that means that every single captain that we had in all the franchise are American or Anglo-Saxon.
That's very true, actually, when you think about it.
I mean,
Most of the
do we
characters
count?
too.
Yeah, do we count Michael Burnham as Vulcan? I don't know.
Hey.
But
She's
we
from
can-
Alabama, and every time I listen to her talk on the show, like I can hear her accent. Like she sounds like someone down.
Oh, so
the road.
Necro Martin Green? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no win for international viewers.
Rios, would Rios count as a captain on the show, and would he count as American too?
No, he's Chilean in the show, and I mean, he speaks in Spanish, which I really respect Picard for doing this, hiring an actor that is supposed to represent a character that speaks Spanish and who is actually a Spanish speaker, not like Picard.
Yes.
It was too late to recast the guy at this point, though.
Yeah.
Picard,
Well, you know,
right?
there's like this thing where he was supposed to have a French accent, and he tried, and they were like, "No, do not do that."
Yeah, I heard that interview.
So
Oh.
no, that's that. Okay, let's count Rios. That makes me feel better.
Yeah, Rios is nice. Usually their international inclusions are British. I mean, Bashir is supposed to be like a person of Arab descent, but like the minute he opens his mouth, he's like as British as possible. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff. But yeah,
Will they be like, yo, Reed's from Japan?
yeah.
It's still like
So-
Reed, and he's still English, right?
But anybody, any character created and actor cast in the Star Trek franchise is when they're trying to be worldly, quote unquote, about it, they usually end up being British, because for an American audience, somehow, and this is still perplexes me, being British is our indicator of worldness and internationalism, which is sad. It's so sad.
Yeah, I mean, in the last, first episode, I was going to say the pilot. It's not the pilot. In the premiere of Strange New World, when they showed World War III and show this image, it's America, and then there's like Paris. It's like, oh, it was other countries too. Like, let's bomb the Eiffel Tower to show that. I was like, what about the rest of the world? Just show like a shot of the Eiffel Tower, and we get it's the whole world, the US and like kind of France.
Yeah, well, as French people, we can't complain too much, because France actually gets quite a lot of exposure in Star Trek.
Do not start on this.
I was going to say that with the Kurtzman era of Star Trek, you know, whatever qualms people have with it, I think that there's been a couple of moments where some real cultural inclusiveness has happened. There's an animated short treks with Sonequa Martin Green in it or her husband or boyfriend or something, about an African folktale that they've changed into a science fiction story. And in the second episode of Strange New Worlds, through Uhura's character, there's an awful lot of talk about Africa and Kenya. And I like that they're going in those directions. I don't know if that gives it, faithful service or not, but just putting it on the screen is kind of nice.
So, I don't know what my computer is doing. Sorry. So I'm half African. My dad is from East Africa. So I'm very glad to see African representation on Star Trek, especially now in Strange New World and Dr. Mbenga and Uhura, who's officially from Kenya now, even if she was speaking Swahili already in TOS, right? But what we said for Rios still stand. I love Celia Rose Gooding, so that's not a stab at her, but she's not African. She's African American, and she's supposed to be a Kenyan, born and raised in Kenya. So I'm just like, yeah, cool. As an African living in the US, that's always kind of a sore point, kind of, because I'm like, it's not because you're Black that you're Kenyan. And Africa is not a country, and all Black people are not from Africa. So I'm glad to see African representation, but then why don't you cast an African cast?
Yeah. I mean, it's still an American show. And and Americans as a culture, despite being the most multicultural polity in the history of our species, still thinks of African or Black people as another. And so it's good enough to cast an African American as another, which is crazy.
I'm gonna just say that Babs Olusanmokun, who plays Dr. Mbenga, is from Nigeria. So that's not, I'm not just
I love ignoring
that fact.
I loved him the moment I saw him in that first episode. I cannot wait for the show to visit with him.
Mm-hmm. But then why is Dr. Mbenga not Nigerian? You know what I mean? Like Africa is not one country, and it's like exactly like two opposite places. So I don't know.
I think that brings it to the bullet point that you're talking about, is that this is a show for American audiences. It illustrates an aspiration of American empire and the level of inclusiveness that people are brought in toward. They have to come up to an American standard. They have to be functionally American on the show, and that's how. That's how it's supposed to be. And that's something I've wrestled with quite a bit with the Star Trek franchise. If it's about humanity as a whole, why does it not include the rest of humanity? It's just a production limitation, I guess, or an imagination limitation.
So first of all, do we feel like these are steps forward, even if it is like a kind of like broad scale African representation, and that kind of is in a sense meaningless because it's not specific countries, right? It's like African representation. Is it still a step forward?
Absolutely.
I think so too, yeah.
I have a shirt with written Nyota is my homegirl.
That
I show everywhere. And it's the first Black woman in a show, sci-fi, that I've seen that is African. Even if Nichelle Nichols is African American, for me, when she spoke Swahili on The Changeling, it was mind-bending. It was, I mean, and that whole second episode where Uhura speaks about being Kenyan, and even if I'm not from Kenya, it's like the neighboring country. Like, wow.
She speaks 37 languages. She can speak Swahili. It's fine, right?
I speak 7, so I still have 30 to go.
Oh
my gosh.
You're the real life Uhura.
That's why
you're the closest thing, right?
Thank you. But no, it's really important. And I was talking with a friend who is South Asian, and we're talking about South Asian representation. And I know I watch Star Trek through my eyes, and I don't pay attention to all the people. But she was telling me South Asian representation, there's almost nobody. There is one actor in Ask Not. You remember the cadet that gets absolutely traumatized by Pike? and the Starfleet officer in Discovery season 3, that now his name is absolutely escaping me. But there are other people watching Star Trek that want to see themselves in Star Trek, because Star Trek has been sold so much as we are the franchise that is inclusive and you will see yourself in the franchise. So they have big shoes to fill because that's what they sell to the rest of the world. And then they forget the rest of the world, which is a problem in itself.
So American, though. That's such an American thing to do. You guys are all included. Who are you again?
Well, can we speak about how difficult it is to watch Star Trek when you're not American? Like,
I think so. Yes, I think that's quite on topic, actually.
Yeah.
I had to wait 2005 to see the third season of Voyager, or fourth season, something like this. I mean, that's just this. And now with internet, it's still a problem. France will not get Strange New World before the end of the year. Why? Just why?
Yeah, because they haven't launched Paramount Plus, right? I don't understand the logistics of it, but like I don't understand how you can't just launch your streaming service like internationally at once. But maybe there's like rights that are included. Like there's a lot of legal.
It's a business legal thing, and it's a convoluted maze, and people build entire careers navigating that entertainment legal rights maze, and that's really all it is. Technologically, yeah, they could do that, but who's going to make money distributing it? That's usually the question to answer. And
it's the snake biting its own tail. You know, is that a French expression only? Maybe.
I understand it. Yeah.
C'est le serpent qui se mord la queue. That's what we say. Anyway, it's like in France, there's not a lot of Trekkies. Why? Because it's impossible to watch Star Trek. And then they make it impossible to watch Star Trek because there's no market. Well, yeah, because it's impossible to watch Star Trek. So it just goes round and round and round. And everybody's just pirating it from internet right now. So when they're going to launch, nobody's going to go and watch Strange New World. Like, why would they pay? They already watch it. It's already over in December. Like, it's kind of disappointing, to be honest.
Somebody in this business somewhere is going to champion and figure out how to do a simultaneous global release for anything, for a movie or anything. It's still broken up into pieces of pie and regional areas, and that's a business legal problem. But somebody somewhere is going to do it all at once, and everyone's going to champion that person and say they're a genius, and then at that point the floodgates will be open.
My lawyer is going to call your lawyer, and like we're going to market this.
Oh, here we go. I legitimately thought Disney Plus would be doing that with, like, when they announced Disney Plus originally, I thought, okay, so the powerhouse that is the mouse, right? I thought they're going to release their platform on every single speck of dust that exists on this planet so that they can like make money from every single living being. But they didn't do that. They released it like, I don't know, it was pretty awkward. They had like a test run first in the US, I think it was. Then they went to like South America. Then they did like Europe, and then gradually eventually started getting to for some reason New Zealand and Australia are often included with America. I don't know why.
Anglo-Saxon country.
I know, but it's like they should. I don't know. They don't put it in Europe with like with the UK, right? They both come.
The UK gets it before France and Germany.
Oh, do they? Okay, so.
Oh yeah, way before. Yeah, UK is gonna get Strange New World. Yeah, true. Sorry, I forget. I was born in the 80s. No, the UK and Scandinavian countries are gonna get Strange New World, I think in June, and France and Germany in December, which is surprising because Germany has a huge Trek market. Mm-hmm. Huge.
Yeah, they're massive. They're the only ones that got the TNG Steelbook Blu-rays, I think, or whatever it was. They look really cool. We didn't even get those. What about
Germany is one of the only countries in the world outside the States that has produced, it's not a lot, but Star Trek novels in like original source material in German that had to been translated into English for English speaking people. So like,
oh wow,
Germany's Trek fandom is kind of big, actually, comparatively speaking.
Cool. I mean, just to throw this out there, but the timeline that Gary and I design every year and like update every year. There's like a small kind of like independent Star Trek museum that's in Germany that has it, like they've printed it out and put it up on their wall. So we're very proud of that accomplishment. But also it's cool that there are like these miniature like Star Trek museums. You can do like a virtual tour of that. I could put a link in the description if someone wants to do that.
I'm laughing because when I met you, I was like, hey, you're the timeline guy.
Yeah, that's how I got recognized mostly at the convention. It's like, oh, the guy that does the timelines.
That's good, though. That's good.
Yeah. A lot of people wanted the timeline that we make to replace the somewhat confusing and convoluted one that our people over at Paramount Plus have released. But
The bad one, just say it. It was
like,
bad.
I don't want to throw shade. Maybe they could just rework it a bit, you know?
All
That's
the new
funny.
Trek was not on it.
Yeah, they forgot. Like, okay,
They
so
forgot, like, franchises.
originally when they released that one, there was only Discovery out, but they
Yeah.
forgot to put Discovery on it. So Nick, which was Kitwalski, he hasn't been active recently, but I remember him talking to them and being like, "Y'all forgot Discovery." So they went and updated it and added Discovery to it, but they haven't really updated it since, and they still printed the one without Discovery for the convention,
Yeah.
which is odd. But anyway, maybe they'll get around to making like a really cool new one once like Picard finishes its run or something.
I still
We'll
say, like, just hire me. I'll fix that for you.
That's
I
funny.
know, right?
And I think I've shared this, but we're working on a timeline ourselves. That's a big, giant, still ongoing thing. We're trying to figure out how to add in Picard's second season right now, and after that, it'll be done.
Well, those that want a little bit of like a behind the scenes story here. I once started working on like a multiverse, like a huge multiverse timeline, and the just like regular timeline for Star Trek. And so I did not know about Trekspertise, and I had never like talked to Kyle or anything. But I found this like article documenting all the possible ways of like time travel and what have you in Star Trek. And I thought this is really well constructed and what have you. And so I started using that to like inform the way I started making my multiverse kind of like timeline. And and then later on, I met Kyle and we were talking. We did the Trek chat and everything. And so it turns out that you're the guy that actually posted that whole blog post.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's funny that you use that as a rule base, because like the whole reason I created the rule base was because I wanted to do the timeline. So like that we're working from the same source material is kind of perfect. Maybe it'll put everyone on the same page.
Yeah, it's a whole other thing, but just to like establish a timeline of the multiverse in Star Trek, or even just like time travel, you kind of have to look at like how it's been accomplished, the ways they've accomplished the time travel in the past. So you kind of have to look at it. And I was like, I don't have time to document all of the iterations, but then someone, which turned out to be you, had already done that. So it's like, this is perfect. I'm using this.
It's a pathology I have. Anyway, that's a whole other subject.
That's a whole thing about timeline now.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Timeline Podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Do we think now that, so we've talked about how Star Trek is moving into like, it's moving into this modern era where we, fingers crossed, hopefully we'll get Star Trek released like the same day, the same minute, all across the world eventually one day. But do we think that, I guess the excuse that we've been using since the beginning of this podcast here to talk about like how Star Trek is American, the excuses it's made for Americans, do we think that is now no longer as valid as an excuse if we have such an international fan base and an international kind of like release, I guess, policy going on?
I'm going to say no. I think that the core through line of what Star Trek is, of what the United Federation of Planets is, of what Starfleet is, the kinds of stories that are told around that structure is so deeply and inherently imperialistically American. There's no getting away from it. Like if you deposited a studio in Lagos and let them make their own Star Trek show, it'll still have that basic core line in it because now it's recognizably Star Trek. But in my view, like that is the most aspirational version of American empire, culturally speaking, that we've ever devised as a culture. And giving it to someone else, they'll put their own stories in it, but they'll use the same structure, the same background, the same United Federation of Planets. And you can't get away from how deeply American that is. You know, like Russia or Nigeria or India, their version of what the future looks like is completely different. This version of the future is an American aspiration, culturally speaking, I think.
But to be honest, like I grew up abroad and all our entertainment, like 95% of our entertainment is American entertainment. Like I never really realized it until I moved to the US and I could recognize all the monuments and all the, I don't know, all the junk food things because every single series I've watched on TV were American series, from Stargate, Star Trek, Star Wars, the dun dun low thing that is everywhere on French TV all the time. What is this, like Law and Order? Law and Order.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, Law and Order. Whew.
Right, like Marvel movies, any movies, Disney movies. I grew up going to see the Disney movie every December as a kid, and they're all American entertainment, even if they're translated in French and dubbed in French. It's still American entertainment. We see American police. We know the 911 number before knowing the number for our own country. I'm not joking. It's true. So when Star Trek comes along and offers this American vision, for us, it's already pre-chewed and pre-digested. We are already brainwashed into accepting a vision of the world from America. That's American imperialism, right? Like I felt very confident moving to the US because I knew so much already. If you move me to China, I'm going to be culturally way more lost because I didn't fed on Chinese entertainment all my life. So I don't think it shocked me so much. It didn't came to my mind so much. I think I had to wait Enterprise to be really like, oh, damn, that's a very American show.
That's probably the most American show, isn't it? With like the pecan pies and everything.
The pecan pie, and like Florida is destroyed, so everybody's weeping. I was like, who cares? It's Florida. I'm sorry, it's a joke.
Oh no.
Some offense to Florida. They had it
coming. No, but then like going and like, we're gonna kill the terrorists. I was like, oh my God, what? and the opening credits, man, it's only American. Like the American are going to space, the American have boats, the American have shuttles, the Americans. Like even the fact that the music is in English is telling you.
Didn't they throw Sputnik in there somewhere in that opening?
Yeah, but like the rest of it was American.
Yeah. They put the Eiffel Tower.
I'm trying to find the details here. Come on.
But until now, like the opening credits were just music, and it's fine because music speaks to everybody, right? We can all recognize the theme of TNG because we heard it so much, but it's, you can make it your own culturally. Mm-hmm. But the opening credit from Enterprise, if you don't speak English, you don't understand a word of what is going on there, and that shows you that it's for an American public. And Enterprise was even like clearly made in order to seduce a certain category of fans in the US post 9/11. So as an international fan, when you watch Enterprise, it's literally the series that I could not watch until maybe last year, and I've powered through it because the season 3 was so irritating for a Star Trek fan who's not American.
That's amazing. I've never connected the fact that I despise season 3 so much to that possibility. I mean, I love Similitude. Is that the episode? Yeah. I think it's like one of the best episodes of Star Trek. But just like generally speaking, the whole we're powering on into like the expanse to murder the insects. I'm like, this feels like a spoof.
I mean, the whole franchise. If you zoom out, it's like that frontier, imperial frontierism kind of attitude. Like the Expanse is a microcosm. They're going out to contact unknown people. But what's implicit is that unknown people are usually French or Nigerian, something unknown to the American experience. Yeah, that's funny that you didn't watch Enterprise until lately, because man, it doesn't hold up very well. And then like watching it now,
I mean, I rewatched TNG like maybe a year ago, and like the first season of TNG is a wild ride. What the hell was going on in the 80s? Oh my God. And it's interesting because then you have DS9 and you have Voyager that hold on very well. I mean, mostly 99%, right? And then you have Enterprise and you're like, how does this thing comes after DS9? I don't understand what happened. And there are so many episodes that today would not be able to be on TV. Like, we're like ethically and morally so wrong.
This is something that is perhaps incorrect, but I've always seen like the 2000s in media, or like at least in television and in film, as a very interesting era, because on one hand you have like very, very creative like sci-fi concepts. Or was it like The Island, that kind of stuff? Or what was that thing where they have the people that see into the future, or whatever it is, like that they predict crimes before they happen.
Minority Report.
Minority Report. I feel like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's like some very creative sci-fi concepts, but there was also, I feel like the 2000s is the first time the big like movie industry started kind of like really trying to commercialize and for like make formulaic films with like, I would almost, and I know a lot of people have like the X-Men films very hot, like very close to their heart, but I almost feel like they started diving into like, really, we need the first act to be like this, the second act like this, the third act like this. We're going to have like a fight. We're going to have lots of CG. There's going to be this specific little romance or what have you. And I feel like Enterprise ended up being very much a product of its time in that regard. Like season 3 ends with like a slow motion of Archer running in front of an explosion, right? Like, how 2000s is that?
Why do you make us remember this? I had forgotten this, and now I have it in my head again. Why?
So even though Star Trek does it talks about the future, every show, every iteration is kind of like a reflection of the era in which it was made. And so yeah, I feel like just sadly the 2000s maybe weren't the strongest era for like the middle range films or the middle range TV shows. I could go on forever about how garbage Prison Break is. I mean, maybe Enterprise, yeah, it was living in that kind of era. So
I mean, Enterprise absolutely killed the franchise, killed it until 2009, and I don't even know how they managed to resurrect it with the Kelvinverse, 3 movies, and then we had a little bit of a blank again, right? And then Discovery. But if we speak about Discovery, I think Discovery is still the less American show of all.
You're talking in terms of like form, like the way they've structured the stories, or in terms of like what characters
message, I'd say. Maybe I've been so much brainwashed into Star Trek, I don't see it anymore, which is absolutely possible.
I think that like from a creative perspective, like the people creating Star Trek, like the message has grown or changed. I think shifted. Not that Star Trek wasn't always like about representation and about inclusivity. It's just that I think that there's like I don't know how to say it, but like I feel like it reflects. No, I feel like it reflects America today. It's just that America has changed.
I'd probably agree with that, but I wouldn't mind thinking on that some more. That's an interesting premise. You know, is it the more international flavor? It's still an American show, but
you've given him a video idea now.
I mean, very possibly. I mean, I'm actually interested because, like, right now, the awareness the United States has about global affairs and global cultures, you know, it's at an apogee or something. We're really plugged in, and that's got to be a response to the internet, you know, being able to see everything all at once. And obviously that's going to wind up in the stories we tell ourselves. So I'd be really curious how that's manifesting in the modern era of Trek.
I think by the choices of plots that they had in the last season that really reflect, I mean, their questioning about global warming, impact on other cultures, that makes it a message that is more international because we're all impacted by global warming. So that's why, for me, it's less American. For example, when Star Trek tackles racism, they do it in a very American way. And they speak about racist problems that are real American racism problem. Not that there's no racism in other countries. That's not what I said. There is racism everywhere, but it doesn't show in the same way, and it's not talked about in the same way. But when we watch, for example, DS9, it is absolutely an American way of talking about racism. And again, when Star Trek goes back into the past, it's always the American past. It's never somewhere else. We're not going to talk about the Nazi episode in France in the holodeck with the hero gens because I hate this episode.
Enterprise went to Nazi US too.
Oh, yeah. But
hey, that was prophetic is what that was.
Yeah, true. But that's the thing. Like, all the problems of the world are always American problems. So, for example, when I forget the name of the episode right now, but when Cisco, this episode where he's a writer
Far
during
Beyond the Stars.
Far
segregation.
Beyond the
Far
Stars.
Beyond Stars, thank you. Is absolutely an American episode. I remember watching it as a teenager. I mean, a little bit more than teenager, whatever. And being kind of like not really understanding what the hell was going on. Like I was like, okay, so he can't write because he's black. I was so confused by that episode entirely. And rewatching as an adult, like knowing segregation, knowing the American history, I was like, okay, but like it was absolutely obscure for me when I watched it.
Yeah.
There will never be a day, or at least it'll be in the far future, when Star Trek tackles racism from the angle of like the Arabic cultures living in France, right? That kind of stuff. Like they won't touch that.
But they won't touch that because they don't have writers that can write about that. And
Or
then
even just like
too,
Muslims, like talking about like religions. Like Star Trek doesn't, it's homogenized almost like religion, and it doesn't do much. Like I think the most we've had in terms of religion is like 2 characters in Lower Decks. Like one was a hijabi, and the other was like a Sikh. But like otherwise, we've had nothing in terms of like all of the various religions that exist across the world that are widespread too. It's not like they're like small little.
I feel they just made the Bajorans and they were like, that's our take on religion. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay. Then we're done.
It's an American show, man. And you know, part of that's a practicality of who's paying the bills. I think, and I like exploring science fiction from other places, you know, much different than my own. But like, I think that if Star Trek will probably continue to be that way until somebody outside the U.S. is more excited about Trek than someone inside the U.S. When that happens, I think at that point you'll see the franchise flip gears.
Going to a hypothetical, like imagine that Star Trek writes an episode about the North African community in France and racism in France, just to speak about like what I know. How do you think it would be received? An episode played by American actors, written by Americans, shot in English in the US.
You would have to do like you were talking before. You would have to go and open a production studio in France and have have people that have lived that.
And we've seen what France does with series, so please don't do it.
Oh, did you not like Marseille?
You could piss off France and the United States at the same time. It'd be a trophy.
And North Africa. It'd be like incredible.
Yeah. That's not easy to do. You know, we could do it. We could try it.
Okay.
We could make everybody mad.
I do feel like perhaps, and this is kind of adjacent, but I think that the film that everyone's talking about at the moment, which I forget exactly, is it Everywhere, Everyone, All at Once?
Everywhere, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
There we go. Okay, so I'm going to use that as an example. Okay. And I'm going to talk about, like, I suppose, like Asian American representation in film at the moment, because I think that's like something that's getting a lot of traction, getting a lot of hype. With films like Crazy Rich Asians. So although Crazy Rich Asians feels very American, a film, but then you have like the smaller things that became huge, like Parasite, that kind of stuff. I'm wondering if the inclusion and kind of like the, I guess, mainstream effect that these films are having, and they're bringing in all of these, so people from different countries, they're bringing in international creators, right? International directors, writers, actors, though Michelle Yeoh is like a staple in the US. They're bringing in all these international new names into, I guess, American media. I'm wondering if that could positively impact the way Star Trek goes in the future. Because if they start really hiring people from France to do French stuff, they start hiring people from Germany to do German stuff, people from Kenya to do Kenyan stuff, you know, like maybe that could eventually lead to, I guess, a bit of representation and a less Americanized version of Star Trek, even if, at its heart, it still has those core American values.
I think no, because again, like you have the through line, the Federation, the Starfleet, they're all aspirations of American empire built into the show. So like, unless you're going to kill those things in the universe, you can't get away from them. You're going to inherently come back around to an American way of seeing things. And films in the United States like Crazy Rich Asians and Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I've seen twice now, and it's just such a cool movie. That is all about the immigrant experience multi-generationally in the United States. Like, it is still an American perspective. It's us in the States trying to fight over who should have the perspective. And that's an important conversation, but it is a very localized one. And is Star Trek going to jump in on that? Maybe, but it'll still be an American conversation, just like Far Beyond the Stars.
I absolutely agree. That's what I was going to say. There's a difference between I'm heavily Americanized, let's be honest. And that's why I like Star Trek too, I suppose, maybe. But I'm an immigrant here, and I'm part of the American story now, of the American history, right? And I don't know if, okay, first of all, a franchise that is absolutely all over the world, that talks to every single culture, does not exist. Let's be honest. I don't think it's doable, but I like the fact that Star Trek can be watched by any culture if they think about it a little bit and actually really go into the future. And I think Discovery is giving us this. They're so far removed into the future. They can cut away from a lot of cultural things that are inherent to the American culture. And I think they're trying to do it. But every time I watch Star Trek, I can find something that resonates with me in my culture. I mean, if they stop celebrating Thanksgiving like it's the only holiday around, would be good. I mean, why are they celebrating Thanksgiving again? Like, to start with.
I think I have a theory about why Star Trek resonates with international audiences, and maybe you guys can tell me how wrong this is. Because while we're talking about fighting over perspectives and the U.S. and Star Trek reflecting a more global situation, I think that cultures in the United States, like, most of that is a melting down from global perspectives. There's a lot of different kinds of people here, and it's all been amalgamized into what it currently is. And like, if we talk about any kind of issue in something like Star Trek, this perfect representation of what the United States of America should be, you're inherently going to be talking about like immigration and multiple cultures and working side by side when you have differences and stuff like that. So as international audiences gleam onto Star Trek, I wonder if the same reason that it appeals to people overseas away from the United States is the same reason that the United States of America appeals to people overseas, that they see something aspirational in what we tell ourselves here about what's possible, all the good things that are possible about our way, quote unquote, of doing things. And it hurts me to say that because I've got criticisms of my own culture, obviously, but like, does that jive? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I think that, listen, if the United States can make the utopian Star Trek possibility true, I'm on board. I'm okay with it. Let's be honest. Why not? I mean,
Yeah.
Yes, it's Americanized, but you see that stuff in Enterprise. You see that the idea of Starfleet and the United Federation of Planets does originate from the U.S. And I mean, why not? Why not? Why is it so bad? It's okay.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't mind at all. All I'll ask is, like, as a former pastry chef, all I'll ask is, like, if someone can make a cake better than you, then use that cake. Don't use your own. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It makes sense to go and get the best that humans can make in whatever the thing that you're making there than doing your own.
And I have to say that in all the other series that we watched abroad and we still watch, it's always only American people. And in Star Trek, you do see people who are not American in the crew, even if they're Vulcan or Tellarites or Andorians, they're Kenyan, they're Nigerian, they're Japanese. There's still this possibility, even if they're played by American actor, there's still a person here. I mean, Chekhov. It's just like, it's kind of ridiculous to say, but there's a person that is not American and doesn't speak perfectly English. And somehow the universal translator doesn't fix that, but that's okay. And for international audience, well, I see myself in Star Trek. I see a possibility of myself in Star Trek that I don't see in other American show. Look at Stargate. They're all Americans, like clearly, officially Americans. And I think that's what makes Star Trek the least American show somehow. Does that make sense?
Interesting.
The most open?
Yeah.
It's the most willing to not be American, although it is. Is that what
Or
you
the
mean?
most willing to be a good version for foreigners of America.
It's America Plus.
America Plus.
It's our ambassador to the world. This is how our empire functions, and we just sort of smile and push it forward so that people can chew on that food.
That's what the UFP does.
Yeah. I really like that question, and I really like. I think Chekhov, your example of Chekhov, really brings it home because, like, it is both aspirational and the absolute height of hubris that our Cold War enemy would be on the bridge of our spaceship accepting our way of doing things. And I just think, what an amazing circumstance to see in the 60s. You know, what amazing circumstance.
Absolutely. I do want to say a little something, and I guess I do want to apologize, because the reason why this came along is because when we were doing live streams over on Starfleet Boy, this will take just five minutes. Yeah. We were talking about Guinan, and so everyone has their own opinion. I'm not a fan of the Guinan from the past, like the new iteration that they did. Nothing against the actor. Yeah, I got no problem with the actor. It's just the way that they wrote the character and the way that, like, I guess, like, it's not the portrayal that disturbed me. I think it was really like the context, or like the way that they wrote the character that kind of annoyed me. And there was one thing that really triggered me, is that Guinan was complaining about, like, all of the problems in the US. And so although she was talking about very valid issues in the US, when she said that line that everyone loves now, they traded the hoods for the suits. I feel like as an alien being that had the power to move herself around the planet, I was quite confused as to why she didn't go to other places on Earth and experience other cultures on Earth. And I'm not saying that her experience would have been better, because, you know, there are massive issues going on in the 21st century across all of the planet. But I feel like at least her perspectives would have been broadened. I felt it kind of narrow-minded, especially from like an alien, like an Elorian, to stay in the US, in like LA. So I found it very bizarre. So anyway, so I do want to apologize, because I said something to the effect of, like, Americans have no culture, which is probably quite hyperbolic.
Very hyperbolic.
It comes from, I said something like Americans don't have any culture except for, like, Black Americans, which I feel like have developed Black Americans have developed a very unique culture, in terms of, like, it's not African, but it's not so much, it's like, it's a very unique culture.
So we're on a polemic podcast. That's it. Like,
no, not at all.
Dragging me into something. That's what I see now.
Not enough people listen to this. But I am apologizing for my hyperbolic statements here that I was making. America does have culture. It's just that, and we're talking about it. We're talking about how American culture has influenced and impacted and kind of like birthed this whole franchise.
Listen, when I moved to the US, my mother, who is French and lived in different countries, she was a doctor without border, and I lived in different country before that. And I said, "Oh, I got a job in the US. I'm moving to California." My mom literally said, "You're moving to the US, but you love, like, culture. Why are you going there?" And I remember being like, "Mom." What are you even saying? And then she came here and she was, "Oh, that's not at all how I imagined the country." And that's the thing, is like, we are heavily Americanized via media, but somehow the vision of America that is given is so always white Anglo-Saxon that people abroad
diluted, washed down.
100%.
See it as a huge country that has a very narrow and young culture. My mother will tell you before coming here, there's no history here. It's like, what are you talking about?
Oh my God.
And that is the thing. And I had the same argument when I went to the Smithsonian in DC. It was my first time in the US in 2015. And I was at the Native American Culture Museum. I don't remember the exact title of the museum. And the guide showed us, like, you know, this piece of Peter Pan where they're like Native American with the feathers, like very insulting images. And he told me, oh, you're from France, so I'm pretty sure you imagine all Native American like this. And I was like, hold on. If we imagine all Native Americans like this, is because you fed us that image. Like, what do you expect from us? I mean, I was born before the internet, man. Like, I have excuses, but it's true that I don't remember why I started to speak about that.
We're talking about America having no culture, right?
It's heavily ingrained too on the way American media present themselves abroad. And that's where Star Trek is actually different, because you do see different people on Star Trek. You do see them talk about different culture and having different food and having replicators that can adapt to your specificities and having bridge member from all over the place. I mean, when Kirk says there's no bigotry on my bridge, I mean, that's kind of a better message that I've ever seen in any other American show until then.
Yeah, you know, that charge that the States doesn't have a culture, that it's an amalgamation and that's not really a culture, that is something that goes back hundreds of years, right? Mm-hmm. When the whole thing happened with Nazi Germany in World War II, like the political cartoons being lobbed about the United States depicted us as like a crazy robot of amalgamated pieces that nothing ever fit together, and it didn't make any sense. But you know, human cultures don't operate that way. We're so much older than even Americans give themselves credit for, and a lot of that has to do with us having a ruling ethnic group who've chosen a particular perspective. And even in Star Trek,
it's perception, isn't it?
It's perception. And even in Star Trek, like, you get an implicit bias about some of that sort of slips through unconsciously. And it's hard, you know, not to notice that, or not to, you know, ingest that and not think about it. Like the whole Peter Pan thing is a great example. Like what I was talking about at the top about, you know, the Confederated States and federations and how that had an origin in the European contact tales, that there were people in North America doing those organizations. Like, America is, the ideas that are at the beating heart are so old. You know, they've been in a sense co-opted, and I don't know. It's an interesting conundrum. We don't have a lot of self-confidence about ourselves. Mm-hmm. And yet we are absolutely brimming with life. There's so many different kinds of people here that if you watch any random TV show, you still don't have an appreciation of it. There are more languages spoken in California than the entire length and breadth of Europe. And like, why don't we see that in Star Trek or in anything really? And you're right, Star Trek does go probably the furthest in a kind of American inclusivity about that context.
Yeah. I know what I want to say. I want to speak about Guinan.
Yeah.
I already answered that. That resonated with me, because I've been a foreigner for 15 years in different places. And yeah, sure, I can leave. I mean, I can get the fuck out of here whenever I want. I have a European passport. I can literally go and work anywhere I want in Europe. And I have no problem with having like a green card, having no deal with immigration. And though I'm here and I have to deal with American immigration, believe me, that is not funny at all. That is not a good time at all. And I pay taxes here, you know, and I don't have health care. It's not funny. It's not cool. So everybody's like, you can go back to Europe. Yeah, I can. But you know what? I can choose to be here too. And I can care about this country, even if it's not mine. And I can be pissed about what's going on here, because I live and love people here that are from here and that are here. And the idea of like, just like, oh, but you can bail and you can go somewhere else. First of all, every single countries have problems. Okay. Everywhere in the world is can we swear on that podcast? Yes.
Yes, no worries.
Everywhere is a shit show. Believe me, I've lived in the Middle East. I've lived in Europe. I lived in Asia. I lived in America. Like, believe me, every places have their problems. And it really resonated with me because when I see what's going on in the US, it pisses me off. And I'm not from here, but I love the people here. And I love what they've built, and I love who they are, and I loved how they dream. And being just, sure, I can bail and I can go and live a better life somewhere else doesn't solve the problem for people here. And I will be like Guinan and be like, they're fucking up. Why are you doing this? Look around.
I'll come and visit you at 10 Forward.
But that resonated with me, like, honestly. And again, I can take a plane ticket and leave whenever I want, but I won't. I like this place, even with all the crazy things happening. Yeah.
For the record, I consider you to be one of us. So just you chill. You aren't as American as the rest of us. And
can you call the immigration for me? Can you tell them, hey, you know, I met
the paperwork. I'm just saying culturally, but absolutely, man. If you've been here this long and you're this plugged in, I mean, like, there's no, like, bringing your perspective from elsewhere to here is the most American thing you could possibly do. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'll stay and be pissed, even if I cannot vote, you know. I'll still complain.
We can all be unhappy together. It's perfect.
America has like a huge influence on the world, I feel like. Since my youngest age, I've always heard about people talking about how American politics and how like American decisions impact the world on like a global scale all the time. So I guess it does make sense that that kind of, I suppose, impact would be like amplified in this science fiction future that we're looking at.
I think it's mostly the nuclear bombs. You guys have to pay attention, because if not, we might invade you. Sorry, that was pretty cynical, but like, come on. We're exporting so much media. You guys, like, often is the case that other people outside the States know much more about us than we know about ourselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Often. And it's because we're so loud, culturally speaking. And like, you know, you guys can't help but to know details about how our politics run, while meanwhile in here, we don't know anything about how it works. And I just think that the whole world's on the same page about that except us.
Every American election is like followed abroad, because whoever you elect is gonna impact us. Like, if you elect somebody that decides that global warming is not a thing, a whole country of like 300 millions, how many are you? You're many. Yeah. is gonna pollute a planet that we share too, and we're gonna be here like being like, oh, but recycling is mandatory, and we're going to try to fix a country of 60 million people when on the other side of the planet there's like 400 million. I don't know how many people there is.
It's almost as if people like other world leaders are elected in response to like the American American leader.
But like, if you elect somebody that is trigger happy, we're all kind of worried because we can be next on the list for no reason at all, and it's kind of worrisome. But on the other side, I'm gonna say that I'm from a Western culture, right? I grew up in France. I'm French, so you know I'm Westernized. And there's a set of value in the US that I respect, and I have the same values, even if they're not respected in the US all the time. But but you know what I mean? At the core of the idea of the American democracy, there are values that are my values too. So when I was saying, hey, you know what? If America actually wants to do Starfleet with this set of value that we see in Star Trek and that I believe in, I'm game. I'll celebrate Thanksgiving. I don't care. Let's go to space, people. Let's be nice to each other and go to space and don't be jerks.
Thanksgiving should be replaced by First Contact salmon, I think.
Absolutely. I like salmon better than turkey, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, do you guys have any final statements or something? Because I think it's been about an hour at this point. So any last words, any final words?
I mean, I like Star Trek. It's a good franchise, even if I'm not American. I just hope everybody in the world could watch it at the same time. And let's replace the Thanksgiving turkey by First Contact salmon. And I think 10-10, we got it.
I think that Star Trek is an aspirational recipe of American imperialism. And I say that as, you know, unbiased as I can, being a completely an American person and a member of America's ruling ethnic group. But that is who we pretend to be. That is who we try to aim for. And if that has resonance with people outside the US as well, I think that probably, like you said, it you know, it's not that bad a future. Like it can be a lot worse. And, you know, I think that's what it is.
Okay, I agree. And I think that although Star Trek, you know, like all other American franchises, I think struggles sometimes with representation. It's been doing a very good job, or at least a better job than a lot for a long time. I think it'll only get better. And I think that as people that are not American, we can put up with seeing like Abraham Lincoln floating in space now and then. It's okay. It's okay. We can live with that.
Oh my God, let's not talk about that episode.
If it's counterbalanced by like green hands that do not represent any culture specifically, that's fine.
For me, Lincoln has been counterbalanced by Stacey Abrams, and I know we're like at the last word, but that was hilarious when sorry, I'm gonna open a new thing. But when Stacey Abrams appeared in Discovery, I was like, ah! And I actually was just coming back from Atlanta, so that was very funny. And it was hilarious to talk about that episode with people in France who were like, have no idea who she is at all.
I will admit that I didn't know. Like, so I'm not American at all. I'm from New Zealand. I'm like half Kiwi, half French. I now live in Canada. But like I didn't know who that was. I was like, they hired some actor. And then everyone was talking about it online.
It was very interesting because by talking about Stacey Abrams, people that have no idea about American politics started like to learn about what was going on in Georgia, what she was fighting against, what was her platform, why it was so important that she was on TV. And somehow, by something that is absolutely American, they made it a question for people who are abroad and started questioning, oh, do we have the same problem? Are they people in our countries fighting these problems too? So somehow, you know, it all works out. Stacey Abrams president, man.
I mean, I'd love to see it.
There you go. That's the final word you're looking for. President of Earth. There we go. All right. Thank you both so much for joining me. I'll add some links in the description of the video and of the podcast so that people can check you out. You guys are the best. I think you guys were like the perfect pick for this topic. You're both very intelligent. You make me sound stupid next to you, which is brilliant. I need to have some great things. Yeah, you can plug anything you want. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you can listen to me every Thursday night with Strange New Pod live on Twitch at 9:30 Eastern. We review Star Trek, and I'm sometime funny on Twitter at Lyrical Girafe with one F, because I'm French.
I'm your new fan, 100%.
Hey.
There we go.
I am one half of Trekspertise YouTube channel about video essays about science fiction, and we're working on an essay right now that is, and this will change, but the tentative title is "The Prime Directive is Racist."
Okay.
Won't make anybody mad at all with that.
That's a bit clickbaity.
I have opinions.
Well, I mean, I'll say one thing. Trekspertise has a way with words like this. These videos, once they're produced and once they come out, even if you disagree with the title, it at least puts them into perspective and you really start thinking about them. So, and I think that's really the goal of the videos, right? It really is just to open up conversation and
yeah.
So wonderful video. No, wonderful videos. I will say it forever. I fell in love with your channel the moment I came home from Arrival, and I was like, what the fuck did that movie mean? And
I love that movie.
and I'm watching this Trekspertise video, and I was like, he hasn't cleared it up, but at least I have more context now.
I love that movie, man. But yeah, I thank you, sir. And hopefully we'll keep that consistency up.
Absolutely. I'm sure you will. All right. Live long and prosper. Thank you to everyone that's been listening. You're the absolute best. And again, thank you to you guys. See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.